Good morning. My brother Demetrius and I used to do everything together. He was my best friend. I used to look up to him so much when I was a young man. And then as we grew to become kind of adults or young adults, we just became the best of friends. We'd do everything together. We would work together with our father in the fields. After work, we would go climbing in the hills. We would have friends in the village and friends in other towns. It was the best of times, and we would do everything together. We were inseparable, Dimitri and I. Those were the best of days. Until one day, the most terrible day of my life. We had just finished work, and it was a hot day, and so we went down to the lake to cool off for a swim like we did so many days, and we used to jump off this cliff into the water, Demetrius and I. We took turns jumping until I slipped. I didn't have the leap that I wanted to, and as I fell into the water, people told me that they just heard a thud as my head hit a rock on the way in. Demetrius apparently jumped in after me, grabbed me up, and dragged me onto the shore. And everyone said that he was just calling on the gods to bring me back to life. My head was bleeding. I wasn't breathing until finally he said something that I think changed everything. He said, "His life for mine. If you just bring him back, then you can take my life." I think that was the moment that changed everything, because right after that, I spluttered. I remember looking up, and there was Demetrius. There was Demetrius, so glad that I was back to life. Well, my head hurt like crazy for days, and it was like a blur. But as my mind started to clear and I became better, it was as though Demetrius's mind just started to get worse. He started to have these nightmares, and he would wake up at night just screaming, and we would try to console him, and then they started to come into day nightmares. He would see things, he would see spirits moving, and we couldn't see them, and so we just had to try to comfort him as best we could. And it went further and further to the point where my parents actually took him to see the priests. And our local priest could do nothing. And so we went to a priest in another town and to a different god, but we went to them and they could do nothing either. My parents were paying out money while Demetrius just got worse and worse. It went on like this for weeks, months, probably even years, until Demetrius got to this point where he started to become verbally abusive to people around. And he would strip off his clothes and run around naked. He would yell curses at people as they go by on the street. People would start changing and shifting their attitudes towards us. They would start yelling at our house, "Demonic, Demetrius, demonic, demonic," and they would hate on us. It was hard. We couldn't sell our goods in the market. It was hard for us to be able to live. I mean, we used all of our money to go to the priests, and then we hear later that those same priests were saying that it's because my brother didn't go to the festivals that he was like he was. That if only they would give money to the temple and honor the gods, then they would not end up like Demetrius. He was being used as kind of like the brunt of people's jokes. Everyone would look and laugh at him. Sometime later, he actually lashed out and he hit our mother. He hurt her really badly. I saw in his face just this moment of clarity, and then he ran. He ran and he went into the cliffs. It's where we bury our dead, the kind of cemetery and he goes and lives in those caves. He lived in there for a long time, and I would go almost every day and take him bread and try to speak with him, but he wasn't there. He wasn't the same Demetrius. It was like he was gone. Until one day. This day that changed everything. This day where boats came across the sea. I could see them. I was up with Demetrius near him, trying to calm him in the caves, and these boats come and land on the shore. Demetrius runs down at them. wildly. I thought he was going to kill them. I mean, he had hurt and injured people in the past. I thought that this was going to be the time that he took people's lives. And he ran down and just seemed to stop in front of this one man. And I didn't understand it at the time. I was too far away. But Demetrius tells me that something in that moment just cleared. His mind just suddenly came back to him and he could see. And in front of him was this man that he called Jesus. He said that Jesus had removed all of the demonic forces from his mind and he had healed him. He'd made him well again. That Jesus actually was God. The worst thing then happened. Demetrius said he wanted to go with Jesus. I wanted Demetrius back at home with our family once more so that we could be united and everyone could see who he is. But Demetrius just wanted to go and spend the rest of his life with Jesus. And Jesus said, no. You're not to come with me, Demetrius. You are to go and tell people who live around this region that I have changed you from someone who was filled with demons to someone who is made whole again because of my impact on your life. And so that's what Demetrius does now. He goes around and he tells people about this Jesus. He tells them that their gods aren't gods and that there is only one God and his name is Jesus. His life is transformed, and finally I have my brother back. Oh, there were some downsides to that day. There was a herd of pigs that went straight into the lake. Man, the owners were so upset with Jesus for that, and they tried to hurry him out of the region. But the one thing I know is that my brother was lost to us, and now he's found. That's me. Hey guys. Just had a friend of mine who shared a story. If you have your Bibles, this is Mark chapter 5, reads like this. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day in the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to get into them." He gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened and the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus didn't let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. This is a crazy story, okay? Like in the Bible, if you go through the story of Jesus' life, there are a number of times where you just go, whoa, wow, that happened? Like, what is that about? One of the interesting things is that there is no way that this story was made up, because this kind of fiction, if it was fiction, wasn't invented for hundreds of years later. So no one in this time was writing fiction like this, with the details of the area, the region, the cities. No one was writing this. And that 3 of the 4 biographies of Jesus' life include this story, tell us that not only did it actually happen, but also there's something incredibly important about it. So why was this story included in the Bible? Why is it so important that we need to hear about it, and 2,000 years later we're speaking about it and sharing about it in church? Well, there's a few different reasons. I'll come to the main reason at the end. But three things that kind of really grab me in this story. The first is that we often think of Jesus as mainly going to Jewish people, and he did. So Jesus was a Jewish man. He lived in Israel. And most of his ministry was to people of Jewish descent. But the interesting thing is that here, Jesus goes to a region called the Decapolis, which is Deca, which is 10 in Greek, and polis, which means city. And so there were 10 cities in this region to the east of the Sea of Galilee that had predominantly Greek-speaking people in them. And it's interesting that even today, the nation of Israel is populated by a real mix of people. So when I was there earlier last year, we went driving on a Saturday, and we were going through different villages. Some villages were predominantly Jewish, and those villages were like ghost towns, okay? There was no one in those villages out and about because it was their Sabbath day, their day of rest. And so they would stay inside their homes and do things with their families or go to their local synagogue. So you didn't see people on the streets. And then you go to the next town and it's bustling, it's Saturday, people are working, people are out on the streets buying, and so people are living, Christians, Muslims, Jewish faith, all living together in Israel today, just as they were 2,000 years ago. So it's interesting to think that Jesus went out of his way to connect with people who weren't just Jewish people, but were people of different ethnicities too. And so we know he went here to this region. We know he went through Samaria, another people group that the Jewish people didn't want to relate to. And so Jesus went out of his way to connect with people, and people that were different from him, which is great because I am not Jewish, and probably none of us here are Jewish. So that means that he shows that he goes out of his way there, and he shows he still is going out of his way to connect with all kinds of people. So it's interesting that he went to a non-Jewish region. The second thing I think that was interesting, if we look at kind of Jesus' life and ministry, is this whole thing of demon possession. Now, you can look through, if all you do as a Christian is read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 biographies of Jesus' life, you would get the impression that there is a lot of demonic possession in our world today. Like if you extrapolate that and go, wow, well, what happened for Jesus is still happening today for us, you would think that demon possession is almost commonplace, is almost normal. But what we see here is actually something quite different and quite unique across the span of biblical history. So if you look through the Old Testament, there are very few places where it speaks about demonic interaction with people, and oftentimes it's only for a moment, a time, and then that goes away, or that's healed. And then after Jesus, and the rest of the New Testament, and then into the early church, we just don't see much of this happening. It seems as though there's this high point of demonic activity in Jesus' lifetime and the ministry that we have recorded for us. And then after that, it goes back to next to nothing, very unique, very, very, very small amounts. So why is this? Well, I'll put my hand up and say, I am not a demon expert, okay? Some of you are like, oh man, that's good. Some people love this stuff and spend years looking into the finite and digging apart and coming up with deep demonology kind of theology about how demons exist and how they work. And look, I was a child, a Christian in the 80s and early 90s, so I've read some great Christian fiction, so I could tell you what, I believe from that. But when I look at the facts, when I look at what we have in the Bible, what I can say is this peak of interaction of demonic forces seems to me, this is Matt theology, okay? So if you disagree, that's okay. I'm just giving you my perspective. It seems to me that Jesus, as the king of the spiritual world, came into the earthly realm, and a couple of things happened. One thing is The devil saw this and tried to react, tried in whatever way he possibly could to tear down the plans of Jesus. And so we see demonic forces kind of being placed in front of Jesus, Jesus interacting. But every time he does, Jesus wins. Jesus comes out of it looking more powerful, looking more godlike than ever before. The demonic forces are orthodox in their belief about God or about spiritual things, okay? So they believe in Jesus because they can see Jesus. They know he is the master of the spirit world. So when they see him, they ask questions. They're like, what are you doing here, Jesus? They ask, and this is interesting, they say, surely it's not our time yet. And that's one of the things that this demon asks. It's not our time. And one of the interesting things when you look at their understanding is they know that they are defeated. That at the end of time, the book of Revelations tells us that they will be thrown into the lake of fire. They will one day be destroyed. They seem to have some reign, some rule on our earth now, but in time, they'll be destroyed. And so they ask Jesus, they're like, wait a minute, what are you doing here? I didn't think our time was up yet. Which is a really interesting thing when you start hearing about what demonic forces are saying to Jesus. But how does that then relate to our day? So it seems as a peak of activity, the devil really tried whatever he could to be able to pull Jesus' plans down. And then after it, we see kind of life going back to some form of normal. Now, what I think about this is that the devil is very smart, very wily. He knows how some things will be able to take one group of people away from God. Another type of thing will take another group. So when I went to India years ago, we went and we met a guy who had a really big healing ministry of people who are possessed by a demon. And we learned that these people were mainly mums and dads in very, very poor Hindu villages in the mountains of the Himalayas, like the foothills. And they would go and they would... that their kid would be sick with some sort of illness, disease, and they would go to their temple and say, if you can heal my kid, then I will give myself over to you. It's kind of this kind of thing happens. And so they then get possessed. They open themselves up to possession. And their kid, I don't know whether their kid gets better or not, but you end up with all these people who are possessed. And in their culture, in that religion, it seems as though people see that and they kind of interact and connect with, if you want your kid healed, then you go down that pathway. So the devil seems to have his way there until this guy was starting to come through and exercise the demons, pray for these people and see results of people being healed. So that strategy wasn't working as well anymore because people were coming to faith in Jesus. I think as much as demonic possession may still happen in our time, I think it is not the devil's primary way that he interacts with a broken world. I think when we look at our world, we recognize that our hearts are broken. We're not perfect. We do things that are wrong. And so the devil doesn't need to possess. He just needs to suggest. He just needs to nudge and put things in our way. He needs to tempt us with power, or perhaps with the wrong person to be hanging out with, or perhaps lust, or tempted towards sin in some way. If we really think about it, the easiest thing to do is to kind of say, the devil made me do it, and not take personal responsibility of our own spiritual lives. But in our day, I think the most important thing is to see it's actually our hearts that are broken. Does the devil want us to sin and fall away from God? Absolutely. But there are so many temptations in our world that so often people get taken away from God through those temptations that the devil doesn't need to do more interaction than that. So Jesus had a lot of interaction with demonic forces, but I think there's a shift. I think it's different after Jesus and even today. The third thing that I think is weird about this story is the pigs. And we kind of look at this, and so many people, that would be the main focus of the story, right? It wasn't the main focus for Jesus telling the story and his disciples giving it to us, but we kind of look at this and go, what? Like cute, pink, cuddly, smelly, stinky, mud-infested, pigs. And we kind of think, what? No way. How is it that 2,000 pigs could just be be killed like that? Why does this happen? This doesn't make sense. Surely Jesus could have done it a different way. And he could have. And I looked into different commentaries of what people say. Some say, well, it's part of Israel and pigs were unclean animals, so Jesus was getting rid of those pigs. And other people say it wouldn't have affected them in a huge way because of the pigs would have drowned, but they would have fished the pigs out. They would have been able to sell them still. They were still used for meat. We don't really know what the purpose was of Jesus doing that. We don't really know in the demon world how things work. Some say that he put them into pigs so they couldn't possess a human anymore, and they were now animal-level demons. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. The more I look at it, the more confused I was to understand why Jesus did this. My own personal theory is that, there was an orchard around. There were a lot of apples. Pigs had drowned, and they fished them out. They had to make something out of this. They were creative entrepreneurs, and so they made devil sausages. And that's how devil sausages came out. I made that up myself. It's a joke, guys. Total joke. Don't come and say that that's where it came from and tell your kids, because it's probably wrong. But I think the most important thing in this is that it teaches us that Jesus believed that this man's life was more important than 2,000 pigs. Like take that in and think about that. That one human life was more important than 2,000 animals. Now, are animals important to God? Yep, absolutely. He calls us to look after and creation. He's made it for us to enjoy and inhabit and live in, but people are eternal beings. We will be here and we will be in heaven for eternity. So as eternal beings, he sees our value as even more important than the animals. And so when we think about this, I think the greatest reflection is that we look to what Jesus did and we see that he loved this guy so much that he would even say, I love you, you're more important. Your life, your health, your well-being is more important than all the animals because you are important to me. And I think that reflection is the same for each of us. If we are to grasp that God's love for us is so much more than other things that go on in life. His love and his intention to be able to make us whole and well again is way more important than a decision you make, a job you go into, a party that you have. It's more important that we have relationship with Jesus than anything else that goes on in life. And when I think about how this played out, how this story kind of reflects to the bigger story, the truth is that Jesus came and he did have power over demonic forces. That's the big deal of this. He wanted to show people he had power over demonic forces. He had power over sickness and he healed people. He had power over the wind and the waves, and so he calmed the storm. He had power over all these different things as you kind of go through it and you see, wow, Jesus had power over all of these things. He was the ultimate power. And yet the ultimate power ended up a lot like the demoniac. Who when he went to the cross, he did so for us, and he was stripped naked. He was stripped down and beaten and hung on a cross for us, for those of us who give our lives over to him, who admit we're broken, we've done things wrong, we want forgiveness. When we understand what he's done for us, his nakedness and shame. He went to the tomb, he went into the grave for us. And then he rose again gloriously to be able to prove that he even had power over death, so that those of us who believe in him might be forgiven, might be able to have a relationship with him once more. Isn't that exciting? There's a guy who you may know of, you may have seen. I don't know, I used to work in Toowong, and people used to call him the bag man. Anyone heard of the bag man? People who do things that are different than the rest of us, people who do things that are a little bit weird. And so he has stuff in his bag, and he wheels around a cart or just carries bags around, lives in different spaces, and he's been there for probably 30 years at least. Okay, I remember 20 years ago working in Toowong, and he was there. 30 years ago, man, I'm old. Working in Toowong, and he was there, and he'd drive home, and there he was. The bag man was there. He was known, and I actually think the demoniac was known. Okay. When we think about what he did, he was healed, and then he said, Jesus, I just want to be with you. And Jesus didn't say, okay, because this would be great. You could learn, you could be like one of my disciples, lucky 13th disciple. One of these guys isn't going to work out. Why don't you jump on with us? You could be number 12 in the future. But instead, Jesus said, no. It's better for you if you stay here and witness to the people of the 10 cities around this region. You think about the people living in those cities in that day, they would have known this guy, okay? You think about, so many of us who've kind of been through the area of Toowong know the bagman, and he knows what he does. So many people would have known about the demoniac, would have seen him, would have been like, oh man, he's a crazy guy, would have told their children, don't go anywhere near those caves. There's the demoniac lives there. They would have heard their priests from their different gods say, if you don't follow, then you'll be like that guy. He would have been an example to not be like. But yet when he was healed and transformed, we then start seeing Jesus says, go out. He's actually the first evangelist. Go out and tell people about me. Go out and tell people what I've done for you. That's all his job was. Go around these 10 cities and tell them, I was broken. I was filled, I was plagued, and Jesus healed me. And I think that same request that Jesus gave to the demoniac is a request he pushes back to us as well. You know enough. This guy knew Jesus' name and what he had done for him. That was enough to go out and evangelize. And so Jesus is saying to us too, you know enough, get out there and tell people about me. Tell people you've been healed from the inside out. There's something that's changed within you because of me. Tell people about that. People may not know you, like the bagman, I hope, or the demoniac, I really hope, but they may know who you've been. And the more and more we push into who we've been to who Jesus called us to be, the more we'll bring the light of the gospel into the world around us. The Bible tells us that Jesus stands at the door and knocks. He's knocking on the door of people's hearts. He's not a bully that he'll knock the door down. He's just knocking and he's saying, I'm here. I want relationship with you. I want to connect with you. I want to have life with you. I want to come in to your life. And some people open that door and let him in. And some people have other rooms of their life. They're like, I'm just going to keep that to myself. Jesus, you can come into the house. I'll be a Christian, but just don't come into my workplace because I really like my work and I hear that you send people overseas to be missionaries in really difficult places. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to lock away my career from you. Or you can have me, Jesus, but I don't want to talk about you with my family, so I'm just going to keep that part locked away. Or there's a secret that I've said or done that I don't want anyone to know. I'm just going to keep that from you. Jesus wants to just keep knocking on the different parts of our life so that as we sense the Spirit knocking, that we might open up our door, open up our lives more and more to Him so that He can transform us so that we then can go out and share that transformation with the world around us. Does that sound good? Let's pray. So Lord, in that, we just want to open our lives to you. We want to open the door of our hearts to you, that you might see into us, that your Spirit might speak into our hearts and help us to be able to unlock the door of our lives, unlock the door of our shame, unlock the door of our brokenness, unlock the door of those things we want to hold on to and we don't want to give up. Help us to unlock the rooms of our life for you to come in and fully enter, to fully fill every room and every space so that everything we say and do might be a reflection of our thankfulness, of how great you are, of your glory and your grace and your peace. Help us, Lord, to be able to reflect that to the people around us, to the people in our workplaces, to the people in our schools, to our family, to our friends. Lord, help us to reflect your goodness and your love. We pray this, Jesus, in your holy and mighty name. And I just pray, Lord, that your hand might be washing over us, that as we respond to you in worship, and it might be like an outpouring of gratitude for your goodness, your grace, and your love. Pray this in your name, Jesus.